Welcome to Dulles. We're a community of faith that embodies the love of Jesus for the good of our neighbor and renewal of our world. We're so glad you're listening.
Easter Sunday, always every spring, closely correlates with the start of baseball season. And something happened that was fascinating, at least to me. Many in the sports world, sports writers, still to this day write about the greatest prediction ever made in sports history. It was in the 1932 World Series. Babe Ruth at the plate at Wrigley Field, and my dad, who's the biggest baseball fan I've ever known, he could tell the story probably better than me. Babe Ruth points out towards center field, not just saying he's about to hit a home run, but pointing in the direction of where the home run will go. And then, of course, he powers that monster shot heard around the world. This photo was taken just after the home run when he's crossing home plate. Now, it's interesting that this is generally still talked about almost 100 years later as the greatest prediction that's ever happened in sports, although some Chicago Cubs fans who were there that day said, no, he wasn't predicting his home run. He was saying something to the pitcher. And so who knows? It sheds some doubt on the prediction. Well, here's a prediction that left no doubt. You know this one. This is from football. Super Bowl III, it was January 9th, 1969. At the Miami Sports Club, just before Super Bowl III, the lowly Jets had somehow made it to the Super Bowl. They were playing the powerhouse Colts. There was not a chance in the world the Jets were going to win. And Joe Namath, how about this for press day? How things have changed. Joe Namath is by the swimming pool in Miami when the press, and he uses the word guarantee. I guarantee we're going to upset the Colts. And it's still considered the greatest upset in football history. There's something about predictions that fascinate us, maybe at first frustrate us. You hear someone before the prediction's outcome, you can say, who is this guy? That's crazy. Who do they think they are? When the prediction, in some cases, happens, we're often like drawn in, like, wait. Wait, how did she know? What does she know that the rest of us didn't know? Or what kind of education? Or is it instinct, right? All right, stepping out of the sports world, Steve Jobs said something in 1983. This is a photo from the Tech Forum in Aspen, where he's telling everyone, he made a prediction, the day will come in America where every household will have a personal computing machine. And the response to this prediction was, he's crazy. He started this fledgling Apple company. There were questions whether it would make it. The response was, not only will most homes never have a computer in them, because Americans won't need one, only companies will need a mathematics machine to do complex formulas. Americans will never pay the money for a computer. And it's funny, that took decades. If you say, well, Joe Namath's prediction is kind of a 50-50. You know, maybe technically it's either going to be a win or a loss. I mean, Steve Jobs' prediction is more complicated. It wasn't happening that weekend. It's decades in the future. Maybe his prediction was harder. Maybe it was easier because he understood computer science, or he knew the trajectory of software and how practical it would become. What I know is that I made a decision to follow Jesus for a number of reasons, compounding reasons. One of the reasons were the predictions that Jesus made. And I don't mean I just decided, wow, I'm kind of impressed. I'm going to religiously affiliate with Jesus, or I'm going to attend church often. I gave my life to following him in part because of the predictions he made about his death and his resurrection, namely. But there was one particular version. You know, he refers to this regularly. The disciples, when he would talk about his death and resurrection, the disciples it just didn't register. We know this at the Last Supper. In the final hours, they still didn't understand. They thought when he talked about his dying and being raised to life, he was somehow figuratively giving some kind of metaphor, or he was speaking poetically about life in heaven after you die. They just didn't understand it, but Jesus spoke to it clearly. And there's one particular instance, this is a different version of his prediction, that is my personal favorite prediction I've ever heard anyone make in history. And it's in Matthew 16. Jesus has taken his disciples north to Caesarea Philippi. When Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples. Now, he's about to ask them a very consequential question. And their response and his teaching will end up changing the course of human history. It will change the world forever, this conversation. But I want to start first with the location, why they're in Caesarea Philippi. This is unusual. This is the furthest north Jesus ever went. Jesus spent most of his time in his 3.5 to 4 years in and around Galilee and in Jerusalem and Judea. He went to Jerusalem often for the festivals, Passover. He was at the temple a number of times. A lot of his time was spent in Galilee, but then he goes further north, 120 miles from Jerusalem. And you know, we think we're flying to the moon right now. It's nothing for us to get on a plane and fly to LA or to Europe. In this day, if you went 120 miles from Jerusalem, you walked. That was the option. It was an investment to go this far north to Caesarea Philippi. And Jesus, the disciples don't understand it, he is setting them up for this conversation, and really you and me for the conversation that's going to ensue. And it's fascinating if you intellectually engage with what's happening here. And it's not just some kind of Bible story and Jesus says some things none of us will ever understand. If we engage with this, it ends up being life-changing. The first Caesar, following Julius Caesar, the first official Caesar was Augustus. Augustus was still Caesar when Jesus was born. Augustus declares himself the Son of God. And it's interesting that in doing this, the Latin phrase was Divi Filius. Divi of divinity, or to be declared, deified. Filios, son of the deified, son of divinity, son of God. This was a phrase that Augustus used of himself. And we know from history, he didn't actually think he was born offspring from God. Augustus didn't believe that. This was a propaganda technique. In naming himself son of God, and people who were mostly illiterate, in believing somehow he'd been adopted by the gods, it would give him even more power, more authority. And so this caught on, and all the subsequent Caesars would use this phrase, Son of God, Divi Filius in the Latin. The city of Caesarea Philippi had been renamed Caesarea in honor of Augustus just before Jesus takes the disciples to the city for this conversation. One more bit of info here about this city. Remember Herod the Great? Awful, wicked ruler who'd been appointed by Augustus to reign over what we would call today, modern-day Israel, part of Jordan, part of Syria. This was the region that Herod the Great ruled over for Augustus. Herod the Great was a power crazy, and we think of power crazy today, and we can name our own names if we want of people who come to mind, but in this day, Herod the Great killed his own sons, literally. He wouldn't let anyone threaten his rule. So much so that when there was talk of a baby being born as king of the Jews, he ordered all the babies in Bethlehem to be killed. Remember this Herod the Great? Herod the Great went to Caesarea Philippi, this same city north, where Jesus takes the disciples here, and he built a white marble temple to Augustus Caesar as a way to appease to see, we call this today a sycophant. Sycophant is someone who appeases or praises in order to get something in return, power, recognition. Herod builds this temple in Caesarea Philippi to say, yes, Augustus is Son of God. He is the Son of God. In fact, worship happened. It was known in this part of the Roman Empire that if you want to worship Augustus, you really should do that in Caesarea Philippi. Okay, now we're starting to understand some of Jesus' logic, his strategy, his intention to take the disciples to this location just in front of this white marble temple where the Caesar of Rome, the greatest empire on earth, is worshiped as the Son of God. That's the setting. Jesus is setting up in this conversation the ultimate showdown. The ultimate showdown location between the reigning empire on earth, the Roman Empire, and this new kingdom that he has brought. This radically different kingdom that he's calling us to give our lives to. Jesus is directly challenging in the disciples' minds who actually holds all authority. When Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say the Son of Man is?" Now, first, Son of Man is this title Jesus uses for himself. In English, we do capitalize the Son because he's talking about God. He's referring to himself as God, but born as a human. So that was the phrase that was used. Son of Man was this idea, God born a human. Often Jesus' birth would refer to the Son of Man. The King of the Jews would be born, Son of Man. Who do people say the Son of Man is? Referring to himself. Isn't this a risky question? Can you imagine pulling somebody at work aside and saying, hey, I want you to be totally straight up with me. When I'm not here, what does everybody think of me? What do they say about me when I'm not here? Some of us wouldn't struggle with that. Some of us in some contexts would be like, I'm not asking that question. I don't want to know what people think when I'm not there. Jesus is asking, I want to hear. What's the word on the street? Now, a note about moral relativism. We know what this is. Moral relativity is the idea that you can choose to believe what is true and what isn't true. You can decide. It's up to you to decide what is true. So, just an example in this. A really extreme example would be something ridiculous like everybody's marveling at the beautiful sky. It's a beautiful, crystal clear day, and everybody's talking about how blue the sky is, and you decide, no, it's red. It's red. I mean, this is a crazy example of moral relativism. Where it, in practice, in a lot of our lives, is internally and personally. When we want something, we crave something, we need something, we feel out of control, we want more control. This is when we tend to decide what's true for me, what feels right to me. This is where absolute truth is set aside for what I need to be true right now. Do you love your neighbor? Are you to care for your neighbor? Often a stranger, Jesus teaches us. Well, you could argue that's actually dangerous. People hurt people. It's part of our experience. We've been hurt by other people. It's actually unwise to love your neighbor. You should think about yourself and protecting yourself. Or if you're ever going to give to someone, you should amass a lot of wealth first. Make sure, this could be an argument. This is a moral relative, kind of philosophical argument. That's an example. Jesus says, well, no, if you're going to participate in my kingdom, if you are going to walk closely in relationship with God the Father, you must become someone who loves their neighbor, who becomes self-giving. But they could hurt me. Yes, it's Easter Sunday. Yes, they could hurt you. This is how the world will change. And so it's a question of truth. What is true? What do people say about me? They replied, some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, And still other people are saying one of the prophets, Jeremiah or one of the other prophets. What's being said here is the disciples are acknowledging that the common thinking among Jewish people was that one of the powerful, incredibly wise leaders of our past, God is going to bring back, and in that power, oppose our oppressor, Rome. God at some point is going to bring this special one back to us, and in the power of Elijah or the power of maybe Moses or Abraham, or even recently John the Baptist, will oppose and stand up to Caesar, will stand up to the horrendous oppression of Rome. But what about you? Jesus asks. And this is the question for us on this Easter morning. What about you? Forget what is expected in politics. Forget what's said in the news. Forget what your friends think of me. Forget about your grandma's church or tradition. What do you say? Who do you say that I am? Jesus is now going to the heart of what he's about to launch, what he's about to start. And this leads to his great prediction. Simon Peter's the first one in human history. He's the first one to say it. He's the first one to acknowledge out loud what millions and billions will eventually come to the point of saying. You are the Christ or Messiah. This is translated in English, one or the other, often. They're interchanged, and it's the same word. Did you know that, Christ and Messiah? Christ is the Greek Christos. It's the same word as in the Hebrew. The Old Testament Hebrew word is Messiah. It means the one who will rescue, the king who will save us. Peter says, you are the king who has come. You are the Messiah. You are the king, not just the king who's come this time, the king. You are the final king. You are the Savior, rescuer, king we've been waiting for. And then he adds on, the Son of the living God. And this is no accident. Peter knows where they are. He knows the city they're in. He sees the temple. Augustus, Caesar of Rome, Son of God. Peter is the first to say, it's not Caesar. I know now. The Father has revealed it in all your works, in your remarkable teaching. The love that exudes out of you is next level. We can't even describe it. And the power to heal brokenness, broken humanity. I see it's not Caesar. That's a power grab. It's you. You're the one who's come to rescue humanity. Jesus replied, blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood. You didn't learn this in a classroom. This isn't just kind of an intellectual exercise. The Father has made it clear through me, Jesus, the Father's made this clear to you. And I tell you, and now he uses this wordplay. Jesus uses his name, Peter's name, rock. He's using this wordplay to talk about something's coming. I'm saying it right now before it happens, before it starts. Jesus says, I'm going to build something, and it's going to sweep the globe, and it's going to be built on this revelation you've just said out loud for the first time, Simon. My church. I'm going to build my church on this rock, this reality that you're speaking to, that there is no other king than human power. It's me. I'm the king who's come to save people from themselves, from their sin, from their brokenness, from their deep-seated anxieties, from that shame that they just can't shake. They can let other bad mistakes go. There's that one thing. From a lost sense of confidence about the future. I have come to rescue humans back to that place in Eden where you stand before the tree of life and you eat and thrive in life. I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock, this revelation, this reality, I'm going to build my church. Now, that word church, what Jesus spoke was the word ecclesia. We translate it in English as church. It's interesting what happens in the Western world when you ask somebody, what is the church? Tell me about your church. You know what Westerners do? Certainly here in our country, they refer to one of two common thoughts about the church. It's a building. They start talking about the building where they attend church. We built this building. And it's beautiful. And we have pews, or we have seats, or we have a kids area in our building. And we worship God at 10 a.m. on Sunday mornings. It's like a location and a time. This is the way we've been taught in the Western world to think. Church is a thing that happens on the calendar in a building. Jesus that isn't even crossing his mind here. That is not what the word ecclesia means. Ecclesia means a gathering of people that become a movement. It's a gathering of people that have some kind of common experience, so much so it impassions them, they become a movement. The second thing that Westerners tend to think now, and this is tragic. I would take building any day over this. Westerners tend to think in terms of church as political movement. Oh yeah, it's a movement. It's somehow affiliated with politics. The church stands for something in some kind of political activism. This is not what Jesus is suggesting at all. They think he's about to conquer Rome, literally defeat the corrupt Jewish leadership in Judea, and then move on towards Rome. Little do they know that he's going to allow the political system to actually kill him. And this is just so counter to how the disciples thought, and it's counter to how a lot of Americans think today. It's the most tragic thing that we align faith in Jesus restoring and rescuing humanity somehow to politics. It's interesting that Jesus is declaring here the start of a movement, and you never start a movement, not in this world, not in that day. Movements didn't survive. They didn't survive days, let alone months or years. Remember I referenced King Herod killing all the babies? That's what happens. There's talk of some other power or some title. A baby's been born, kill all the baby boys. That's the world that Jesus is talking in right here. When Jesus' movement is recognized, when he begins this, from this day, his movement begins, the forces are set to put an end to Jesus. They are so determined to squelch this movement, they crucify him. You don't start movements in the early Roman Empire, especially the early Roman Empire, not in this part of the world. And the movement survived and you survive. It did not happen. Which is one of the most compelling things to me about following Jesus, trusting him with my life. He predicted that this movement would not be stopped. He goes on to say, and the gates of Hades, he uses this word Hades. We often say hell, we generalize Hades and hell. And there is a commonality in Hades and references to hell. We tend to think of this dark place with flames and fire. And Hades was the name of a cave in Caesarea Philippi in the big 500-foot limestone wall. There was like an opening, a grotto, and a natural spring came up out of it. And the thought of the day was that it was dark in that part of the cave. When you looked in the water, it was dark. And if someone ever fell in, they would descend into Hades. They would descend away from life. Anything that was life, any joy, the ability to live, but you would be away from the presence of people, the presence of creation and life, and that was Hades. This is Jesus' pictorial way of describing death, any kind of death. The gates of death will not prevail against my church. Nothing's going to stop my church. Corrupt people will try to lead the church at times. The church at times will tragically start wars. They'll align themselves with kingdoms of this world, and that will confuse people, and it will be utterly tragic. But no. The church that I'm starting, that I intend, not even the gates of death will be able to stop it. Nothing will stop this movement. Nothing. And then, just a short while later, Jesus died. His prediction was so wrong, and it was so confusing. The disciples were all in. They bought in. Peter said it first. They all say it. You are him. You're the one. It's not going to be a political leader. It's certainly not Caesar. It's you. You are going to change the human heart. You're going to transform us and reunite us to walking with the living God. And his followers became unfollowers. Now, this is a social media term, and it's Easter Sunday, and I understand, but this is what happened. They unfollowed. And it's clear. It's remarkable. This is another compelling reason I followed Jesus. The writers, the disciples and followers of Jesus who wrote the eyewitness accounts, they wrote into the story their own denial, their own betraying him, their own hopeless fear, seeing no future. They were crushed, the weeping. Thomas said, I will not believe. I will not believe unless I can place my hands in the wounds. I saw he was dead. They were utterly crushed. And it was all of them. One of the disciples takes his own life. They're in disarray. Only one of them went to the cross with Jesus, with his mother. We know John. All other 11 abandoned him. And then Jesus is seen alive, so much so that they all start following again. It's like, I changed my mind. I mean, I don't want to make too light of this, like referencing social media, but it's just amazing what happened, and we see it in the historical account. This reversal, that they would give their lives. He's alive. He's alive. I saw him. We saw him. The women saw him at the tomb. Then John races. He's outrunning Peter to the tomb. They're trying to figure out, was his body stolen? Then they see him. Then they begin encountering him. Then he fixes breakfast for them. On one day, 500 people saw Jesus alive in one moment. And not only do they refollow, they give their lives. They give their lives. Literally their lives to this movement. How do you explain that within just a couple of centuries, the Roman Empire that sought to put him to death, to end his movement, by order of Caesar Constantine in 313, the entire Roman Empire recognized Jesus as the Savior who had come to rescue humanity? How do you explain that? When you think of this in terms of predictions and unlikely outcomes, how do you explain that here we are in the 21st century, movements never make it, kingdoms never make it. People have been talking about how long will America last? Will America still exist 100 years from now? I don't know. If you get depressed by that thought, shift your focus to the kingdom that Jesus brought to this world. This kingdom has not stopped. Nothing will stop it. Not even death will stop it. Not even Jesus' death would stop this kingdom when he took power over death in his resurrection. So I'm going to have all of you stand. We're going to close in worship this morning. And I'm going to ask you the question that Jesus asked us first in Caesarea Philippi. He wasn't just asking the disciples. You understand that, right? You understand Jesus wasn't just asking the 12, who do you say that I am? This became the question that would change our allegiance, our hope, our faith in a system, in a person, in a leader who would make better, who would heal. who would restore humanity, he's asking the question, who do you say that I am? Forget what others think. I understand there was hurt in your childhood. I understand what happened in that church. I understand what a lot of Americans think. Jesus is saying, but what about you? Who do you say that I am? And are you ready to follow him and join his movement? The movement of not only being transformed by his love, his self-sacrificing love toward you, but you, so embedded with that love, you become an extension. You begin expressing, most likely through your story and through care, being available to broken people. You become an extension of this kingdom, this new restoring life that you and I have received. Sometimes the prayer that I will lead people into when choosing to follow, maybe this morning you're going to decide to refollow, or you need to decide, or you're at that point where you know, I was following and I became an unfollower, and maybe for good reason. I don't know what was done to you or what happened to you, what your experience has been. Maybe you're here this morning on this Easter morning, and you know in your spirit, like Peter knew, revealed to him by the Father, this is true. It's not what Brad's saying, it's that this is what truth is. Jesus is the one who's come for me. And maybe you've never made this decision. And there's something in you, you don't know if it's in your brain or in your heart, you can't explain it, but you know it. You know there's this compelling force to follow Jesus. And as simple as it sounds, it doesn't sound very preachy, it doesn't sound very high church. The prayer, Jesus, today I give you my life. But that's the prayer. Not just this ugly part where I really need help. Jesus, I give you my life. Maybe you've never given him your whole life. I give you all of it. My future, the mistakes, the hurt, the anger, the confusion about confidence. I give you all of my life, Jesus. I'm going to give you just a moment. Make those words your words to him today. Jesus, I know who you are, and I give you my life. The band's going to lead us here, and I want to just read the second portion of that Easter morning story in John's gospel. This begins in verse 14. At this, Mary turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not realize it was Jesus. She's been so crushed, and how could she? How could anyone be Jesus? She saw him on the cross. He asked her, "Woman, why are you crying? Who is it you're looking for?" Thinking he was the gardener, she said, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you've put him, and I will go get him." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turns and she cries out in Aramaic, Rabboni. When it's written, cries out. This isn't Rabboni, teacher. She's like, "Teacher, it's you." Jesus said, "Do not hold on to me. I have not yet ascended to the Father. Go instead to my brothers and tell them I'm ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene went, and I think she ran faster than she's ever run before. She runs to the disciples with the news. "I've seen the Lord. I've seen him." And she told them that he had said these things to her. On the evening of that first day of the week, when the disciples were together, with the doors locked for fear, they're still fearful of the Jewish leaders, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." And after he said this, he showed them his hands and side. The disciples were overjoyed when they saw the Lord. Amen. Let's worship.